across the river, the other side, was where the two docks, the North Dock and the South Dock, were first established. They were the first docks in Swansea. But by the 1860s, it was becoming obvious that they weren't big enough. Swansea was developing, and it was enormously important for copper, but as the 1870s began, copper began to dip a bit. And in fact, by 1900, copper production in Swansea was going down. Largely, quite severely, largely because the countries that exported it were starting to smelt themselves. Chile, believe it or not, originally imported Swansea coal, which is a hell of a long way. So the boats going to Chile would carry coal out, copper in. It was a journey normally taking approximately 6 months. And some journeys were recorded as taking a year or more if the weather was bad, because they had to go around Cape Horn and then back. So it's very difficult. It didn't matter to the copper owners, as long as there were dozens and dozens of ships regularly bringing copper in, which there were. They were all quite small by our standards, 300-400 tons. They were wood. Metal ships were useless for copper at first, because copper ore attacks metal fittings, and iron particularly. And when they first shipped copper ore, they discovered if they put the copper into the bottom of the ship fell out because the nails corroded. So they had to resort to what they called the Swansea fix, which was essentially creating a box within the ship which had carefully protected metal fittings, the box itself being wood. So wooden ships continued to be very important to Swansea right through the 19th century. And indeed, there are pictures of the 1920s, believe it or not, with plenty of sailing ships in Swansea's harbour, and that was an inheritance of the copper trade. Speed didn't matter as long as there were lots of ships. Swansea lost about 26 ships in the last quarter of the 19th century. These ships were death traps, effectively, and there was a huge loss rate amongst them. It was obvious by the end of the 1870s that Swansea was also developing new industries. The big new growth industry was iron, but not so much iron in itself as tin plate. Tin-plated iron, tin-plated steel, again up in the valley. And that business required coal, bags of coal around here of course, and it needed transport to ship it out. So Swansea became the world's centre of tin plate production. Llanelli, of course, is famous for it as well, but the Llanelli docks were always at a disadvantage because the Locher estuary tends to silt up. Swansea was the big centre for tin plate, and the tin plate industry was really booming by the 1870s, and other industries as well. Mostly the same kind of industry, smelting metal, and to a lesser extent working it. So the owners of the Swansea Dock Company, Swansea Harbour Trust, had to do something. There wasn't much point in trying to expand to the west. They therefore decided that this area, Fabian Bay, which no longer exists as a bay, should be filled in, and the creation of new docks. And the first of these we're looking at now is the Prince of Wales dock, opened in the 1870s by Edward, Prince of Wales. And this was really very important for the new booming trade of Swansea. Swansea, by the 1870s, 1880s, 79 this opened, was really booming. It was a very important town. And this big area was the single most important dock. You can see it's much deeper than the others across the river. It takes the biggest, more modern ships, which were then being built into the carrier business, and it was very important for the development of Swansea. So the Swansea Valley poured its outcrop goods through here, and importing all sorts of stuff as well. Coal, it became a major export for coal, particularly Welsh anthracite. Queen Victoria would never have anything except Welsh anthracite. That was because it was smokeless, and Chile didn't like the smoke of the oil coming. So this was a major export point. And this dock used to be surrounded by a vast complex of buildings. This one is one of the very few left. They've all been demolished, they fell into disrepair. That building there is known in Swansea as the Norwegian Church. And originally it stood right on the road where we come from. It was moved here when this area was redeveloped very recently in the 90s and early 21st century, and re-erected. And it's a testimony to the connection between England and Scandinavia. It's a Lutheran church. I don't think there's much of a congregation nowadays, but Swansea was a fairly international port, taking in and sending out, above all, vast quantities of tin plate. And now it's the SA1 development, which I'll leave you to form your opinion on. It's interesting, as they say. Right, we go down towards the next dock